All right, guys, this is recording. Welcome to the Engineer Muscle Podcast number 8 today. Today we have a very special guest, Alberto Nunez. Most of you probably know him from Instagram. Dude is a big deal, and we're just so excited to talk to him about training, nutrition, the competitor lifestyle, and yeah, just, all health and fitness related things. So, Alberto, just why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself? Tell us how long you've been lifting, what got you into it, that whole deal.
Yeah, I think my course was a little unusual in that it wasn't because there was something wrong with the way it looked. It really just started out as I wanted to hang out with a friend who he was into lifting. So he brought me along, but it was like all it took was one session, and I'm like, oh wow, this just feels so right. And I caught the bug right away, like right away. But I was still kind of going, between that and sports. So I'd make gains, lose them once like track season started or whatever I needed to play to get access to the weight room quite often. So I would play sports just to like get access to the weight room. It's like, you need me to play some baseball, I'll do it. I'll even pretend that I'm interested in soccer if it, gets me into the weight room. And then 19, and it was one of those things where it was at next level in track and field. And I thought it was going to be like barely good enough. Like I might go to a crappy school somewhere. And then also I was just having issues with injuries. So first time ever at 19, I had my full year of just like training in peace. And I was like, wow, like this is cool, but too bad there is no end game with this, I guess. Or at least I didn't think so. And then I discovered natural bodybuilding. I'm like, that's what we can do. But those guys look like so freaky and out there that I'm like, you know what, I'm gonna need a while. So I just focused on building for a few years and then competed 5 years later. I was pro qualified after my second year. Shortly after that, we developed 3D Muscle Journey. At the start, it was just myself and Eric Helms. It wasn't 3D Muscle Journey. We just knew we wanted to do something together. Jeff Alberts, another one of our coaches, had the website, and we're like, dude, we don't have a website. Can we, we know how it works. So we're like, can we kind of crash your website and you can be part of the team? I've been doing this forever. Jeff competed for the first time when I was in 5th grade. So we're like, we definitely need you on the squad. And we started as just like, we just wanted to put out information and cover the sport more than anything because coverage was quite slow at the time. But then I guess our information was good enough where people were like, do you guys help people? And we're like, well, I guess we can. And then shortly after that, about a year later, we started to help out people formally. And that was like in 2010. And here we are, like, it's going to be the 10th year pretty soon. And we're going strong. And, every year we manage to make some gains as a company in regards to our contributions to the sport. So, man, it's crazy. I started lifting weights just because I wanted to hang out with a friend. And here I am 2 decades later, doing this for a living. So it's pretty surreal still to this day. As much as it is a lot of work, it's just like, dude, like it could be a lot worse, even when it's overwhelming.
Yeah, no, that's awesome that you shared the whole story. So Eric Helms and you knew each other before 3DMJ?
Yeah, we did our first show together in 2007. Yeah, lots of errors. We both looked horrible, but we got up there.
No, that's great. Your first show was after 5 years of consistent lifting?
No, more. I'd say, well, actually, yeah, like consistent, yeah, like 5 years. So I waited 5 years. Yeah, took my time.
Dude, and like, look, you always knew you're gonna stay as a natural athlete. Not
I
gonna
think
mess.
after I got peeled my first time, I'm like, it's pretty crazy. Like if you know your stuff, because I didn't count a single calorie until I was like in my 8th year of lifting. I had good habits. I showed up often and I worked hard. But once I applied the sciences, I'm like, this is crazy. It's like I have so much to learn, and I'm like, I'm sure there's still more to learn. And if I start doing that, well, it's going to. I felt like it was going to greatly diminish my ability to learn because that stuff helps that much.
No, bro, and like Madison, let's start with nutrition today.
Yeah.
Just because Berto just
I,
brought up.
I was gonna also ask if you generally recommend like giving that time for people to let themselves build up before going right into contests and just coming back down. I know, like from my own experience, when I work with people, I generally will advise that. Because like, what's the point of just, you're losing half a year of time you could be building? That's like my opinion, at least. When you want to go into that a little bit?
Yeah. So yeah, I think a big thing is, your physique will be a lot more developed if you spend, time eating enough and training progressively. But also the habit building part. Because by the time I got to the point where it's like, you know what, if you're going to want to get in shape, you're going to have to count your calories. You're going to have to track your macronutrients. I had a lot of good habits already set in place. I had systems, but, I wasn't really measuring what I was managing at that point. The thing with the contest prep is that there's a lot of the stuff that you pick up, they're not habits that are appropriate, like outside of the confines of a contest prep. So you're not really learning a whole lot either. And for some people, it might be too much too soon. And I mean, besides, the fact that you're not going to learn a whole lot other than like how to get into this specific kind of contest shape, which is not appropriate any other time. It's just the fact that you might be overwhelmed and crippled by the end of it because it was too much too soon. And that's where we see the most common injuries that we do see in physique sports. And that's like the mental injuries, I feel.
I know you're big on that too, like post show and being able to do post show recovery. And I think that's something that you guys have been focusing on recently, and being able to get people's metabolisms back in a place and easing them back into normal life.
Yeah. I mean, all sports have that. I mean, like after a football season, it's like, hey, those dudes they're going to go chill somewhere for about a month before you start running any drills. We don't see contact for a while, that sort of deal. So, after any like season where you put in work, competitively, you need that period. And every other sport follows that model. But with physique sports, obviously, we're a bit newer, I feel, and just now are like the science is really starting to contribute. But it just seems appropriate to me because, man, overtraining, when you look at all the symptoms of what overtraining actually is, it's very hard to do that with traditional weightlifting when you're eating enough. But when you look at the list of symptoms, like that's a contest prep. Like it takes you months to get back: mood, libido, sleep. So you need to fix all that before we can even start thinking about working on our next season. And that is certainly something that we've contributed to a lot in the last 2 years, because we've done it the wrong way before, man. When it was like, season's over, grind time, baby. We're motivated. Let's get back to work. And that just long-term doesn't put you in a good place.
No, and I think was like what you guys inspired me to do. I took the whole last year off to just build. And what was funny, Berto, was that in on the Instagram community is, as a fitness coach, you got to be shining your abs because it's good for the business, right? And it's uncomfortable as hell to let yourself have that room to like gain a little fat and just look like a normal. Like I remember listening to one of your podcasts, 3D Muscle Journey podcast, and I think Andrea was talking about how as competitors, men's physique or bodybuilding, we live in this lifestyle where it's like either we're shredded or we're not. And we think shredded is all that sells. And I struggle with this even today. Like it gets to me.
Yeah, it's hard to put pictures. And you're feeling softer and not at your best.
Well, and the thing is, I think we're all trying to give those new people a form of intervention and catch them early, because we've done it where we start off and maybe we don't start off in the most correct way. And how do you get these people who are new? Obviously, you really can't flex your brain at them. That's not too appealing. So it takes, that look and stuff to really get them to buy into your idea of this is how it should be done. So that's the hard part. And it's something where, man, ideally, and I do think it's happening, the consumer is getting smarter. Evidence-based fitness is something that it's not like, what is that? People at least kind of know that it exists. And eventually, I think most people kind of make it there. But nevertheless, like people still want to see the shiny stuff. And that's really, really hard to combat when you're not really shiny at this point in time.
100%. And so for you, like what in off season, do you keep track of your calories? Do you keep track of things, or do you kind of go the intuitive approach?
Yeah, I think because I had all that practice, I think first of all, I built the base of my physique without really tracking everything. It was just, it was pro-ish, but there was a system and there was habits, there was baseline habits. And, when I'd go to a restaurant with friends, I'd get the salmon and, like a baked potato with nothing on it. So stuff like that. So I go back to that when I'm in the off season, and then also combine that with the fact that, I have tracked things to a T a number of times, and I kind of let that kind of guide me. And long term, if you can get it to that point, I think that's the best approach, because it's more dynamic. Like you can look at your training the next few weeks and like, man, it's going to be rough. I better stay a little bit more on top of like eating enough, or the other way around where you're like, man, I'm going to be a desk jockey for this whole month. So I'm probably going to tone it down just a little bit. So it lets you adjust a little bit more on the fly. And I do think that is the end goal for most people. I think, first of all, like being able to maintain or gain weight at a reasonable rate without tracking. And then eventually it'd be really cool if you could induce fat loss while just kind of, tweaking your system a little bit without necessarily having to track everything. So that is the end goal. But the way you get there is, first of all, forming good habits, and then also being able to understand the value of food in a more objective way.
I think that's a really good point. I think it's a really great end goal, being able to be in that dynamic place where you're able to be adaptive. But it's absolutely a challenge. And, we have a lot of newer lifters that listen to us, and more intermediates as well. And without those building blocks that you built over, the last 2 decades, you wouldn't be able to be as adaptive and as, intuitive about it. Like when you look at a plate, you're like, you have an idea of what the weight of that chicken breast is, or whatever it is you're eating, because you've done it so many times. And most people are so new. They like, even that concept is still like difficult. So I think there's a lot of value in being able to build those habits, and at least tracking stuff for at least some periods of time, just to get an idea of what stuff really is really valuable.
Yeah. You got to earn your stripes. Absolutely, man.
Yeah. And normally when like with beginners, do you normally give them a meal plan, or do you give them a caloric and macros approach?
See, I feel that, a beginner, if they're a beginner, even if they're a little tainted, like, we have
like upper ranges, like a beginner and a little more intermediate.
I think you always give people a little bit more than they can handle, a little bit more, because that's how they grow into it. Like weights, it's like, it needs to be challenging, and then eventually you're flying, and then you throw in more things, and you're like, okay, this whole month we were able to, stay within 200 calories of our ranges, and we made better decisions than we were estimating. And then you tighten it up more and more. Then you get them eventually to the point where it's very precise, and then you're like, okay, you know what this feels like. We lived like this for a minute. Now let's kind of loosen things up and apply everything that you have learned. But I think the important thing is, your goal is to facilitate as a coach, but also to challenge them a little bit, and perhaps make them do things that, they wouldn't have themselves do, like left up to their own,
Yeah, because when I started coaching, I was I started with I was lifting weights, high school sports, college sports, and then men's physique show. And right after the men's physique show, I had enough understanding of nutrition and training that I got certified as a coach. And what was fascinating was that I expected all of my clients to have that discipline of a competitor, and I had high expectations, and it took me like a few months to realize that there's a difference between lifestyle clients and competitors.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it was like the day that it hit me, it was like, woof, it's different.
Yeah, well, I mean, I didn't get it either. Neither did Eric. Like one of our biggest influences, Dr. Joe Klemczewski, like he would talk about, setting your people up in a way so that there's no like things that just explode, like no binges, no like 2-week hiatus from like tracking anything. And we didn't get it because we're like, so how, like, why are these people doing it? Like, why are you going to do this if this is what you signed up for? But the truth is, like, you either took a very good route, or maybe, you did something else in your life that required a lot of structure and discipline, and you were able to bring that over here. So for a lot of people, this is like potentially like the first thing they have ever done where, they're actually like sucking it up and like doing things that they don't feel exactly comfortable with, and it's hard at times, but they're overcoming and getting it done. So again, for that, you have to find where that threshold is, and everyone's, a little different. Like there's certain people you're gonna have to be like, hey, cool down, dude. You're 2 years out from your next show. We don't have to eat 75 grams of fat exactly every single day, but but yeah, no, you inherit all sorts of different situations, and it's important to be dynamic and have empathy as a coach as to where they are at.
No, I love that. And I love hearing that, just because I think the general public in America or throughout the world, they need to take that into consideration. Because as you know, like if you are a complete beginner and it's 2019, January 1st, and you're like, I'm going to lose 20 pounds. The first thing that comes to mind is those brutal insanity workouts.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
like, that's what I'm going to do. And it's just like, I spend a lot of time making fitness simple. And even with somebody who's like I went to school for science and I love reading scientific literature, I'm like, how can we simplify this to like a step-by-step process for certain people to be like, hey, consume this much protein and prioritize this and that. Do people like especially on your social media, do you get a lot of questions from competitors, or do a lot of questions come from people who are just lifestyle busy professionals?
They're kind of all over the place, I feel. But frequently what ends up happening is the questions, they come from a place where they don't understand the basic fundamentals and what things you should prioritize. Like if this happens at all levels, like some people just get really far from just, not because of what they do, but despite what they do, and because they're consistent and they work hard. And that's where the Eric Helms's like pyramids came from, because he kept getting, these questions that were, it's like, man, you're focusing on the wrong things right now. We need to nail down all these things before we can even start to worry about that. So that's why, we push for those pyramids, and we scream those loud and proud, because, all other sports, they have this phase where you go through the fundamentals and you learn that, it's like you need to learn to dribble with both hands in basketball before, we can even start talking about, doing a fancy, like step back three or something, right? We don't have that. And I think the pyramids right now are the closest thing to that. And with the second edition, they're constantly evolving, and we're learning better and better ways to like get these people their base knowledge, so that when they do ask you a question, or when they are stuck when it comes to their own progress and they need to, figure out what's the next move, they first make sure that everything's in order, and then you can start to kind of tweak around variables. So yeah, the fundamentals and the basics, so important, but people, they skip them out of the fact that they're just so excited to just get to work sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a big thing that we've been trying to push on this podcast or forum, is just kind of boiling things down and presenting from that base level of just the underlying principles of why things work and why certain things are the way they are. All the advanced techniques and stuff have a place and are really useful, but they don't mean shit if you don't first have the basics in line and working for you, and at least have a decent understanding of them. So that kind of brings me to a question of like, I want to ask you about your training philosophy, and like what kind of camp you come from, as far as like intensity versus volume training, and just your general approach. Do you program, periodize, stuff like that?
Yeah. Well, I think first it's like, so what is the goal exactly? Like one thing that confuses.
I should define that for someone who's trying to build muscle. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, like I think some people don't even realize that they're trying to build muscle. Like the average, let's just say your average female who signs up for the gym membership, they don't really understand that, a lot of what you're looking for is going to come from just putting on muscle. But yeah, I think, first it's like, what are we trying to do? And most of the time it is just that. It's like, let's tweak, let's like, whatever our body comp is, we want to kind of invert that, like the muscles here, the fats here, and we kind of want to do this. So yeah, you want to tickle your body in a way that you get those adaptations. And thankfully, like it's really straightforward. What makes muscles grow? And usually whatever problem areas you want to solve, like it usually starts with just that. It's like, if we put some muscle on you, you're going to look a lot better, you're going to perform better, you're going to feel better. But yeah, we start with what you want. And then from there, we kind of work backwards. So yeah, we do have to use periodization. This is the end goal. This year we want to put on 10 pounds of fat and maybe lose 10 pounds of muscle and maybe lose 5 pounds of fat somewhere along the way. So you start from the end and you work backwards, and you split it up into little segments that are a lot easier to swallow, because, you know, it could seem so daunting. Like, hey, if this dude wants to bench press 315, but he can only bench press 225 right now, it's like, it seems so far away. But if you break it up into little segments throughout the way, it's less scary, and you can just focus on what you have to do right now to get better. And then over time, hey, if you look at how we have it mapped out, you will get to where you want to get. So yeah, I think firstly, have a firm understanding of what your goal is, what we have to do stimulus wise to make that happen. And then, yeah, like break it down into little segments where, the person feels like they're meeting all these little micro goals along the way, and they're headed in the right direction. So yeah, for this, you have to rely on the person being at least somewhat educated and having some form of understanding of what it is that their goal requires.
No, I like it. And you know what's funny? I know you guys coached Matt August in the beginning. Like, that was a couple of years ago, right?
Yeah.
And the other day I was talking to one of the prospects who ended up becoming a client. I asked him what he wanted to look like what was his goal, and he literally sent me a picture of Matt August. And I kind of chuckled for a second. I was like, Matt August has been training for 8+ years. And sometimes on Instagram or on social media, you're like, just like we were talking about earlier, we forget that when we post our pictures that, like, don't compare your day 0 to someone's year 8. And so that was just a funny comment I had. But
when you do have to do that as a coach, you have to help them out with their goals too, because sometimes they don't know what exactly is appropriate for now. And, you know, the truth is with Matt, it's like, yeah, he's been training forever, but then also, you know, he has like top 1 percentile genetics, I'd say. You know, not a whole lot of guys are going to end up looking like Matt regardless. You know, he's like freak of nature. And you had like 15 years of training, I think, at this point. Like, he started when, you know, he had no facial hair, I believe, you know? So yeah, no, that's huge as a coach, is to definitely help your clients, like, set up goals that are appropriate.
And like Berto, so you've been training for 20 years now. How do you do you write your own training program, or do you have someone that does it?
At this point, I do. But remember a few years back, I had my friend Ben Escrow write me a program, and that was really cool, because I don't have to focus on myself, just get the work done, turn in the spreadsheet, and it's all complete. So I'm a big fan of outsourcing. So I might do that at some point this off season. But yeah, as of right now, I've been maneuvering things myself, and it does help that, you know, it's 20th year, you know, of training, and I have a decent understanding of what works for me.
No, I like it. And how do you set up a program where you can progressively overload even after that many years of training?
Yeah. Well, I think this is where I have to have a talk with myself and okay, so what can you expect? You know, so by no means can I expect, 10 pounds of muscle this off season. Maybe that was appropriate, maybe, 18 years ago or something. But now it's like, all right, dude, so we can, net 1 pound, maybe 2, like you did your job. And to a lot of people, it sounds like, well, why would you even waste your time with that? You have to train super hard and you don't get much in return. And it kind of flip flops. Like the longer you do this, you might get less in return in regards to, the gains themselves, like physically, but you have to be so much more nimble from a cognitive standpoint. So you end up making a lot of brain gains, like trying to crack this puzzle. And to me, that's probably still to this day the thing that, it's like I could easily just go down. There's this one clinic down here where they just give out TRT like it's nothing. Like I went there to get blood work, and there was like all these dudes just sitting there. Like none of them had arms, but they all had these big old traps, and they were all like pink. But so they were there waiting to get to get served up, and TRT can be up to 600 milligrams now if you have a cool doc. So I could do that, right? And dude, I would put on 10 pounds this year, like no issue. But the issue is like, what would I miss out in regards to like, the gains up here? Like it's so much fun to figure this out and then be able to pass that on to other people. So I'm a hard case for sure. And I have a few athletes in my roster, the same thing. I have one guy who he competed back with Kai Green when Kai Green was natural. Yeah. He's done like 100 something pro shows, and getting him to progress is like, he's in his 40s now. He's in his late 40s and we're still doing it. So yeah, that takes a lot of good chess playing. And to me, that's where most of the gains come from at this point. But I'll take it, man, because that's the one. At some point, my body's going to say it's going to quit. And it's going to take steps back. But at least I'll have this, and that'll make me valuable for a long, long time.
So what do you say to some of the tools and solutions that you've had to come up with to crack some of those? Because like you, that's my favorite part of this is like, and when I work with a client too, the same thing of when they're presenting me my problem. That's the fun thing. It's like I'm just thinking about it and trying to put the pieces together. So I'd love to hear some of the techniques and training techniques that you use and stuff like that.
I think there's been two things that have really changed in the last few years, and they might not be what you expect. I think the first one is just keeping it exciting for me, because this is my 20th year of training. That romance period is kind of done. It's like the honeymoon phase with a relationship. It's like I got to find other ways to keep this fun and exciting. So that's important, and I will program in a lot of stuff that, its main purpose there is that it keeps me excited, and it keeps me coming and like feeling that youthful energy when I'm in there. So I think that's a good one. And then the other incentive has been the fact that I do have people watching how I behave, and that's a huge responsibility. So I think that one encourages me to be super rational and objective at all times. Because again, that's the risk I run with running my own stuff and doing my own programming, is that, you can get in your own head and make decisions based off like how you're emotionally feeling, that day, that month. So it keeps me away from that, and it makes me more objective, because the longer you do this, the more objective you're going to have to be, and you can't just fly by the seat of your pants on like how pumped and excited you are. So those have been the two main things. It's just like the responsibility that's been thrown on me to like act right. And then the other one is, let's keep this fun as long as we can, because when it's fun, you'll find yourself progressing most of the time.
So what are some things you've done to do that, to keep it fun?
Yeah. So for me, I like strength goals. Like, as much as I am a bodybuilder, I have certain goals that I want to meet in terms of strength, and it's pretty fun to be able to go back and be like, man, like here I am, almost 36, and I'm about to do things that a decade ago I couldn't do. So strength goals definitely keep me going. I also love work that's very intensive. So every once in a while, I will do something like, hey, let's put 315 on that squat bar, and it's the end of the training block. Let's just go until we puke. Let's see if we can get 25 reps with that thing. So stuff like that really keeps me going, and I've been doing my best to find a way to fit that stuff in.
That's cool. I like that stuff too.
Yeah.
For me, I also like playing around with like different like intensity techniques, or like help keep it, or like spice for me, and I'll like how I combine them or twist them, or what movements I'm using for a given training block. That's kind of like my spices in general. Yeah,
I like to hear that voice in my head, that dude that wants to quit. And I like to punish that dude and be like, no, we don't work that way, buddy. Yeah. You got to keep it romantic, man,
No, 100%. Romantic part is important. Like, where do you, so what's fascinating is that now we have a lot of science coming into our sport. And on the same side, one of the things we talk a lot about is bro science and actual science, and what works and what doesn't work. So for example, like in my own life, my own experience, from the beginning, I heard that anabolic window was a BS, right? Like it just wasn't scientific. So you could consume your protein like any time of the day instead of those 15 minutes post-workout. But what's funny? I believed that. And then what happened was I gave myself too much flexibility. So like sometimes I would just like leave all my protein to like towards the end of the day. And then I would just not, like, I was too filled. I wouldn't be able to consume that. So now it's funny. I'm at a point where like I'm going back to bro science and combining that with science, and like it's coming up to be like a really nice combination of things that work. So what's your take on like balancing bro science and real science and making it work?
Yeah. Man, see, there's definitely bros out there that, they're 30% body fat doing 3-inch rack pulls and wearing the cutoff stringer, right? Like, it's like, dude, what are you doing? You know? But there's also a group of bros that just have a ton of in the trenches experience, and I'm not calling him a bro by any means, but for example, like the bros like him. So that's why I'm choosing to make him an example. But John Meadows is one where he's got a lot of in the trenches experience, and what you'll notice is that a lot of the stuff that like these guys that have been doing it for a long time, they're very objective. They have a good eye when it comes to what's working. Science ends up kind of confirming what they suspect over time. So I think sometimes we see anecdotal evidences, like not evidence, but it's like, no, hold up. Like if all these people are kind of seeing the same thing and, they have great intentions, they seem like rational, objective people, like maybe we should at least hear them out and not just because there is no formal research on that, excuse that as like, it's not a viable option. So, I mean, to me, it's like, yes, I love the sciences, but there's also a lot of in the trenches stuff that that I've learned that things come out and I'm like, yeah, dude, I could told you that 10 years ago, So yeah, when you are a hybrid and you kind of pay attention to both things, I think what it does is it kind of puts you a step ahead of the bros. And then also it puts you a step ahead of the people who are just purely like science-based.
Absolutely. I agree so much. I think anecdote is so valuable. And as long as you're able to look at it with a critical eye and be able to, think about it, and, why does this make sense, etc. Because there's so many bodybuilders that have been very successful. And like, I'm sure people could blame a bunch of drugs, but for some of them, but no, those top guys are still going to be more or less the top guys even if you took the drugs out of the equation. So there's something to learn there, whether you can apply it to yourself or not. That could be a question, but you're able to look at both sides with an objective lens and be like, well, what can I take from this? And what can I take from that? And what's bullshit and what's not? And also, people just see, a scientific study, this must be valuable. But then if you read the study, which most people don't, it's like, oh, well, this was done on a geriatric population. Of course they gain muscle.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's always that asterisk.
And one thing about the enhanced bodybuilders that are objective and rational people is that, they get to see these science experiments that they're accelerated, like everything happens so much faster. So they're, in a way, potentially they're able to learn more faster because they can see it happen right before their eyes. Like, oh, this is what happened when we tried this. We tweaked these things and holy crap, all other variables kind of the same. We progressed a lot. So they have a preview of things too. So I don't completely, when someone's enhanced, I'm not just like, BS, you can gain muscle without training if you take, which is true, you can. But a lot of these guys, yes, they take, but at the same time, like they have all their senses open to what's going on and they're able to decipher what is going on and they're worth hearing out. Absolutely.
And likewise to that point too, because like a lot of people think that the drugs just do everything. You can go into almost any gym and find a bro like juiced to the gills, barely looks like anything, little bit big, well, not really, but like nowhere near even like on your level, because they don't train well and they don't have their nutrition around. They're not magic. They accelerate things and they do stuff, but it's not what a lot of people think.
Yeah, they look like the pink dudes at the clinic around here. That's what ends up happening.
They do a couple of sets and turn beet red.
Yeah, the pork rind skin and the traps, but that's it. That's it.
Bro, LA is filled with those clinics. It's all over the place here. It's all over the place. But no, that's like, what's funny is like right now you have the if it fits your macros approach, the very flexible dieting approach. Like all of us fitness coaches, or even like normal people who know a little bit about science, we start falling into these camps. Oh, I'm a ketogenic dude. Oh, I'm the vegan coach. Oh, I'm like this coach. And then like on top of all of it, and I'm even guilty of it, is like guys with the if it fits your macros approach. Hey, average person, you can eat brownies and ice cream at night and still lose weight. And I think I like the other day, and I'm like, if a complete beginner, a 40-year-old mom in Milwaukee, Wisconsin is reading that, at first she's like, no, the fuck not. I can't eat ice cream and lose weight. And most likely, yeah, she can because she doesn't have those habits built. So how do you like, because I know, I like looking at you and even Eric, you guys have like a very good balance of like, even when I was reading the 3D Muscle Journey book, Eric talks about like the ketogenic diet, and he talks about how like your body, like carbs aren't essential. So you should do some research on your own body, like weigh yourself every morning, look at your energy levels, look at this, and do like a 25-day, I think you like talked about, do a 25-day study on your own self. And how, so for you, like, how do you balance it really well where you're not just preaching one diet out there?
That's hard because we all have our flavors of the week. We're all biased in some way. And, you know, you have to check yourself with that constantly. Like if I'm writing programs for my athletes and then they start to look too similar after a while, I'm like, all right, dude, you're getting into this trap where, you know, this is obviously has worked a few times. So now you think it's going to work with everyone. So yeah, it's important to just be aware of every tool in your toolbox, which again, those are the principles, right? And then be able to, you know, use the right tool at the right time. So yeah, it's super important that you check yourself routinely, and I constantly do. And I feel this is my 10th year of coaching, a little bit more than 10, but I'm just getting to the point now where I feel that I'm getting immune to that, because I'll still catch myself. I'm like, dude, like you just did that video on myo reps with Mark Bell, and now you've handed out myo reps like the last like 2 weeks, like chill, you know, right? So super important. And the better that you are on top of that, the better you can be able to serve a wide variety of people with different goals.
And like, what's your overall take on ketogenic, for example? Do you prescribe that? Do you make exceptions for it, or is it a no for your athletes?
Well, it wasn't a keto. It was a low carb diet. Because again, keto has to be like really low protein. Like for me to do a ketogenic diet, I think I'd have to have my protein at 125 grams a day. And a lot of people don't know that, you know? So I started out with a keto. My first fat loss phase ever was a ketogenic diet. And it taught me structure and it got me going and I saw results. You know, at the end of it, I lost strength and, you know, I didn't have that same pop from a muscular standpoint. So I had to go back and revise. So, you know, I think if there's some sort of system out there that fits you and you can commit to it long enough to see some results, hey, that's a good place to start. But, you know, once you're done with that, it's like, hey, let's make this a little bit better. What can we do better? And it might be, hey, maybe you could add some carbs, you know, pre-training, right? So luckily for my athletes is that, you know, we don't have to start from the infancy. It's like I kind of find something that works.
Bardo, you were cutting off.
That side of the hat, or all right, dude, we're usually somewhere in the middle, you know, and that seems to work best.
There we go. We had a little disturbance in the connection, but now we're back.
What
did you miss? Oh,
I heard it was fun.
I don't know what happened there, but yeah. And Madison, I know you're really interested to talk about ketogenic. Do you have any questions on that before we move forward?
I just wanted to, you know, get his opinion. I think that covers it a bit. Like for me, I related completely to what you're saying now. Like I always use the toolbox analogy, and like I've learned from so many different disciplines, whether it be bodybuilding or powerlifting or strongman or like yoga, so many different things. And like I just try to figure out what works for this, and I just put them all in my toolbox and pull them out when it applies. And like for myself, I'm like, my body can react really strongly to carbs. So like I know for me, I have to be really careful with my carbs. It's really easy for me to overdo it. And I need to be on the lower side in general. But some people respond really great. But some people hear me talk about myself and they're like, oh, he just hates carbs. And it's like, no, I just don't personally, I just blow up and I hold a ton of water and I can put on fat pretty quickly from carbs. I just know myself. But I've given other people, you know, pretty high carb diets.
And that does exist. My first contest prep I did with very, very low carbs, and I didn't get peeled. It was the only contest prep I've ever had where I've actually been like hormonally tanked. So like to be 23 years old and like my stuff wasn't working, I'm like, what is going on? And I'm not even shredded, you know? So
you said it was low fat?
It was high fat. It was high fat. It was high fat, low carb. And hormonally, I was dead, so scary when you're in your early 20s. You're like, it's not supposed to be this way.
Do you think your thyroid crashed on that one?
What was that?
Do you think your thyroid crashed on that one?
It could have been a number of things. It definitely didn't fit in with my hormonal profile. And I hate to call diets hormonal diets, but it definitely, it put a bigger hit on me hormonally than anything else. It just wasn't effective, and I didn't feel right. And nothing felt right. Like my training didn't feel right. Digestively, I felt horrible. So there's all these things, and then I kind of swapped things. And over the years, like I just kept adding more carbs, and my dietary fat kind of just stayed stable. And now when I diet, like at the very end, like my fat is pretty low and my carbs are relatively high for the caloric intake, but that took a while to get there. And like you said, there's people on the other side of the spectrum where it's like, what I felt on a low carb diet, they would probably feel on a high carb diet. And I think sometimes coaches, maybe it works like that for them. It may be more similar to myself, where they're higher carb dudes with lower fat. They try to give that to the wrong person, and you're impeding that person's progress.
Yeah, absolutely. You think one of the reasons that your carbs have increased over time is your muscle mass has probably increased, because like my carbs have gone up, relatively speaking. They're still lower for most people, compared to someone else, but like as I've gotten bigger, I've had to up my carbs.
Yeah, weight training does, I feel, when it comes to nutrient partitioning, it helps immensely. I feel that if people just lifted weights, like diabetes would be less of an issue in this country. So your body does kind of adjust as you become more advanced, and you put on muscle, nutrient partitioning gets better, your work capacity goes up because it has to go up in order, you need to do more in order to progress, and that's gonna definitely reflect on your diet.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think what's funny is that, like, as coaches, our clients look up to us way more than we think they do.
Yeah.
And Madison and I were just talking about it the other day. Like, I've seen coaches where if they pull sumo deadlift, all of their clients would start pulling sumo deadlift. And I remember, like, I pulled sumo because of my very first coach, Derek Charleboy. He pulled sumo, and it was just like I just fell for that. And he pulls hook grip. He doesn't do over under. I started doing that too. And I remember it hit me a few weeks ago, and I was like, my clients look up to me the same freaking way. And I just putting that in your head to be more objective with everything you do, because they're looking at you.
And often, and by the way, me and Derek go back to like early 2000s.
Really? Love that guy.
Actually, like 1999, like way back when we were on teambodybuilding.com when that website existed. But yeah. So that's, as I mentioned before, that's kind of like my thing now. It's like, now I have to be super objective. And if I'm doing something that's very unique to my situation, like I have to explain, like, so I'm doing this because of that, maybe you shouldn't do that, So yeah, it makes you're walking on eggshells in a way, but it's a cool responsibility to have, I feel. It's an honor.
Yeah, it makes you more, and even with your diet, like I meal prep on Sundays. Guess what all my folks do too? Like they do that. And it's like the same routines. And yeah, like when I travel and I'm like eating Panda Express, guess what my clients are tagging me when they go to Panda Express. And like, I know you're really good at starting trends on Instagram. Like Pendlay Rose became super popular after you were like, this is like, I think you made fun of like guys doing rack pulls, and you're like, just not that effective. You guys should be doing proper rows. And
or the 3-inch rack pulls, right? Mike Israel said it. He's like, so ask the guy that's doing 3-inch rack pulls, like, what is this working out? And they couldn't give you a good answer, For my bone density.
No, definitely. But it's cool that you brought up Derek, Charleboy. So he actually, he and I are from the same hometown. So my very first show, I hired him, and that's like the value of hiring the right coach as your first coach. Like he taught me so much, and he put me on this like long-term thinking that I wouldn't have had if it wasn't somebody like legit like him. And I think that's why I was attracted to like 3DMJ and you guys, your books and all the science-based, was because Derek did the right, like I remember like talking to him, like because it was my first ever show. I didn't have much muscle on my body to begin with. I just wanted to compete. And I remember he just wanted to take things so slow. And me being me, I was like, dude, I'm not getting shredded fast enough. I'm like, we gotta. Like, I always thought Derek had something in his toolbox besides cardio and besides calories that was gonna blow this all up. And he didn't. Like, we used 0 supplements and we got there. And I think, like, I do the same thing with my clients because Derek taught me the right way. And I always like tell my audience that your first coach matters.
Yeah. I mean, dude, I remember, I think when you look at anyone who's done anything and like whatever thing it is in their life, like it took a while to get there. Like when you see someone who's like very like wealthy, for example, they didn't just like decide to be wealthy one day and then now they're making 6 figures quarterly. No. They did the basic stuff first. Like, hey, first let me get out of debt. Let me like start living below my means. So it's like a slow, like you have to get that base first, and then you can really start to build like really, really freaking high. I remember Eric Helms when dude just had an AA degree from like Riverside College in Sacramento, and like here he is now with like 2 masters and a PhD and like renowned as like one of the top experts in his field in the world, and on pace to like just be a freaking legend in the exercise science, academia. But it all started with him deciding, I'm gonna get that AA degree at some point, So yeah, people just, they're like, we're going to get this done in a year. It's like, no, nothing great in life works that way. Let's give it a decade and like start seeing it from that perspective. Some people want to hear it, some people don't. But if you don't see it that way, I can guarantee you it's going to be a decade's going to pass and you're going to be more or less in the same place.
Yeah. It takes a decade to be good and like 15 to 20 to be great.
Yeah.
Of real work too.
Yeah. You can't rush that either, man. You cannot rush that. No.
Dude, and you know what's like, yeah, that's even like, that is so true on so many levels, yet it's so hard to hear. Because people, overestimate what they can achieve in a year and underestimate what they can do in 10 years. So like, everybody's kind of like, where do I want to be in 12 weeks? This is where I want to be in 12 weeks. Because everybody's selling that 90-day program, that 90-day approach that what you just said was spot on with everything. Like even like Eric Helms, even like a lot of Mike Israel, all these guys who are considered experts, like real freaking experts. And then you have a lot of, like beginner personal trainers claiming to be experts. And then they feel bad when they're not taken seriously. And I'm just like, it takes work, right? Like
it does.
You gotta be patient with this shit.
Dude, I remember all the stages and just how hard it was at some point and how much I thought I deserved in terms of accolades and success and how much knowledge I actually thought I possessed. And I can look in hindsight, I'm like, dude, you were a freaking baby. The only thing you had is that you were patient and tenacious. But like everyone else, I wanted to rush it at some point. And what people have to remember is that just how, I don't know, maybe you're 25 years old, you're overweight, you're out of shape. It took a while for you to get here. Maybe you got chubby at age 15, once you got into high school. You got yourself into this hole over time, but it also works the other way as well. But no one wants to hear that. Nobody wants to hear that. But if you're open to that idea, dude, you just like you said, you can do so much in a decade where like people wouldn't believe it. This is where you started,
And with a lot of your beginner athletes, do you like the weight training, strength training in general, I think like that is the most sustainable way to live a healthy lifestyle in the gym. Cardio, on the other hand, do you like, when you have a beginner, do you put them on like 100% weight training regimen or like 80-20 with the cardio or 50-50? What do you normally do?
I try to haggle them to the amount that I feel they require for their goal, So maybe they tend to slip a little bit when it comes to their diet. They work an office job, so they're pretty sedentary. They don't need a whole lot of volume in order to progress. So they might be doing cardio, like 4 shortish sessions a week. And we might start there, and that might be too little for them. And I'll work with them, and I'll be like, all right, we can add one more that makes you feel good. But But yeah, like everything, it's like you want to give them the dose that's effective, you know. And same thing with cardio. Like some people are not going to need cardio, you know, because hey, you're a college kid that walks all over this huge campus every day. You know, you have a decent training capacity, or you need a decent amount of volume to progress. And then like you wait tables at night. You know what? Probably we shouldn't do cardio. But then you have people on the other side that it's like, okay, you started lifting when you were 35. You know, we're 2 years into this. You know, you can't handle a whole lot and you sit down all day. Let's get you the appropriate amounts of cardio. So, you know, it goes back to having people understand why it is that we're doing what we're doing and what that actually looks like on paper.
No, and for you, do you ever like take feedback from your clients on like how tired they are, how hungry they are, like a lot of the intuitive things that can't be measured like with quantity, but they're very qualitative analysis? Do you ever do that? Or
Yeah, the whole holistic thing was I think one that we it was a feature that we really wanted. We wanted it to be a big part of our coaching, because the culture is kind of like go heavy or go home, like grind, you know, this, and that's perfect, and it's great to be able to have that if you need it. But at the same time, it's you got to save that because eventually you get into situations where, you know, you'll really need it. So, you know, letting an athlete know what it feels like, or helping them figure out what it feels like to, you know, perhaps be doing a little bit more work than you should, or taking on more in general than you should. Like maybe this fat loss goal, we should slow it down and aim for, you know, 15 pounds instead of 20 for this first fat loss phase, you know, things like that. So, but again, you have to get them to, you want to get your athlete to the point where, because at first they're not going to be able to contribute a whole lot, but eventually you want their dialogue and their subjective measures to be of value. But initially you can't get a whole lot from people, you know. But eventually, yeah, you want it to be a big part. So that dude that, you know, has done 100-some shows, like when he tells me like, dude, you're redlining me, it's like, okay, I can trust that with just that, you know. But when some kid is like, you're redlining me, I'm like, dude, you're 3 weeks out from your first meet, just deal with it, you'll be okay, you know. But yeah, eventually you want to get a person to the point where they can contribute to the dialogue a little bit more. And it's kind of like raising a child, right? Like initially, you know, in the infancy, it's like, no, I'm sorry, dude, you're in 6th grade, you're going to school, you know. And, you know, then they're in college and it's like, okay, so I guess that's what you want to major in, let's do it then, you know. But let me show you what that exactly entails.
no, I like it. And like we were just talking about it earlier. You mentioned like when you go from like a show to show, your overall lean body mass doesn't change that much, right? It's like 1 to 2 pounds, you said. And that was also in the 3D Muscle Journey book. But like for people who are intermediates, like for me, right? What, like where, or even for you, like where do you, when you start cutting down for a show, let's say you give yourself 20 weeks, 25 weeks, where do you stop? Is it mostly like where you look freaking chiseled and great? Or is it, do you have a number in mind or you're like, I'm going to hit that body weight?
There's a look that you're aiming for, and it's certainly dependent on the division. But also I think when you're taking an athlete through that, like you also have to make sure that it's something that they can handle. Like my first season, like getting peeled would have been overwhelming. Like it would not have been good for my head. So you're kind of balancing those two things with a first-time competitors. Like, you know what the look is in order to come in right, but at the same time, it's like, what can they sustain? And again, it's that long-term thinking again. It's like, I don't want this to be your last prep. So I always know in the back of my head, like usually like, this is probably the body weight that they would look excellent in. But let's see how much of the turbulence we can handle along the way. So sometimes you have to slow down a person a little bit, and that's okay too. And it doesn't make you a bad coach. It makes you, I think it's the exact opposite. It makes you a fantastic coach.
No, I like it. Madison, got a question in mind?
No, I'm just thinking it over.
Yeah, no, and
well,
I think about that
I guess, do you have any tricks for overcoming some of that end turbulence, maybe just for yourself, or some of your more farther along, more advanced level clients, just, you know, ways to fighting off the hunger, or just getting past those little sticking points when you're not shredding up as much as you'd like, or that sort of stuff?
Yeah, I think a lot of that's going to come down to in the trenches, you know, assuming that the system is right. Because even when you do it right, sometimes because you do it right, it lets you progress to, these levels that without proper programming, both on the nutritional and on the training front, you wouldn't have been able to get to. So the big thing is just kind of getting in there and knowing that, hey, you're going to fall down a few times, but learning from that and just getting better over time. Because especially when it comes to dieting, like a lot of it is learning to cope with your cravings, learning to cope with, training in a state that's not exactly fun. And that just comes with more experience. Every contest prep I've done personally has gotten easier on that front. So much, in fact, that I've even looked for other challenges to tack on to that in order to just make it spicy. And again, I have to spice things up a little bit because of how long I've been going at it, and adding new challenges that kind of freak me out a little bit. That should always be the name of the game. So progressive overload it's many things, and it takes many different shapes.
Dude. And like when you were training, does your training change when you're off season versus on season? Do you make any big changes, or is it pretty standard?
No, I think it's gone to the point, or at least with myself, like I've mastered it where I maybe lose 5% of my strength when I'm dieting. Like I think my biggest front squat last off season was 315 for a set of 7. And then like I was stage ready, and I remember hitting 315 for 2 sets of 4. And I only hold myself back because the context of the situation, I don't want to hurt myself. So in some ways, the longer you go about this, like the less contrast you'll see between, say, on season and off season, because your habits have gotten that good and your methods are much more universal than they maybe were at some point.
And like for you, do you how do you track your numbers in the gym? Do you write it on journal, or do you spreadsheet, or what do you normally use?
Excel sheets. So yeah, I'll be on my phone, and a lot of the old heads at the gym are like, yeah, this kid's on his phone. But hey, I love that saying, you can't manage what you don't measure. So even if you don't have a proper weight training program, like you'll be so much more effective. And a huge big step is just to start writing things down. It will automatically change the way, you progress in the gym. I can guarantee that.
Do you normally like train first thing in the morning, or are your workouts like later in the day?
No, man, I need to I like evening for a number of reasons. I think one, it's just like I'm more awake. And obviously there's some scientific evidence that backs that up, that, people tend to train better later in the day, but whatever time you need to train, it's fine. You get used to it. But for me, it's constantly been that time. So I stick to that time. And then also for me, the gym is also social hour, because otherwise I work at home, So I'm in there. I'll talk your butt off if you go to my gym, and a lot of my gym friends absolutely know that. Like, stay away from that dude. He'll mess up your workout if you talk to him. So that's me.
And do you ever that's funny as fuck, but do you ever like program your nutrition, like pre-workout nutrition and post-workout? Like, do you fall into that, or are you like flexible around there?
Oh, right now at this body weight, it's when it comes to what being in the middle of your selling point is it you're metabolically pretty flexible. You know how it is when you're dieting. It's like you need that pre-workout to come at a good time to save you so you can get a good session. But at this point, it's more, like step into the gym where it's that perfect combination of I'm not hungry, but I'm not full either. You want to feel kind of like, that's how I like it personally. But nevertheless, there's always these rituals that go into training outside of just like the training, like the song that I listen to on the way, like it's the flavor of the week, right? I take this old thing from Tom Platz where like I will be covered up all the way until it's time to get to my like first working set. Cause like if you see pictures of Tom Platz training, if he's in his tracksuit, he was still warming up. And then when you see him with those shorty shorts, it's because he turned it on. And it works, man. It like lights up your brain. It's like your brain knows when it feels that breeze, it's like it's go time. And I've been practicing a lot of that, a lot of you playing with your subconscious a little bit to make things much more consistent. So yeah, I'm big on rituals, man. Huge on rituals.
No, dude. And what's funny is that you have a really good balance between like the new science and like really watching what the old dudes used to do. Yeah. And there's a lot of value. Like right now I live in LA and I train at Gold's Gym at Venice, the Mecca. And what's fascinating is that you have a lot of old school dudes there. And dude, I just sit there sometimes and I just soak it all in. Like those guys, like they were like the other day, I think Psycho Lewis, who trains Mr. Olympia, he was literally like checking out one of his clients, and he like pinches his skin around the abdomen region, and he's like, "Yep, you're holding more body fat," or like he was able to tell based on how the skin felt whether it was body fat or it was water weight.
Yeah.
Like, damn, that's like expertise right there. That's like 30 years of work.
There's so much. That's the only way you can learn. Only way you can learn. And like, I didn't want it to be that way when I was younger. I wanted to be like no, I want to be able to get in there with these old heads and be able to, contribute as much. But you need to earn your stripes, man. And like, it's finally getting to that point now. And thankfully, like the young people still listen to me, but it might get to the point where, I'm 65 years old and I'm like decaying a bit, and they're like, what does that do? No. So I definitely would encourage young people, especially if they have access to someone who seems to have their head together, whether it be in person or online. It's like, hey, just listen up, because you might be missing out on something.
No, and and Madison, I'll have you ask the next question, but Berto, what do you think is like personal training versus online coaching? So Madison and I both do a lot of online coaching right now, and I know you do a lot of online coaching, but where do, as like people who are listening right now, if they're complete beginners and they have their 2019 goals to lose like 20 pounds, where should they, like, how should they decide whether online coaching is for them or is it like personal training in person?
Yeah. Shoot, I'd say that maybe for a beginner, maybe some online, some in-person work might be a good thing, because it might be basic things like this person doesn't even know how to set their dumbbells up in place when they like dumbbell press, and I know that initially when I started, thankfully the gym that I trained at they had free personal training. There were these 19-year-old kids that they were being paid like minimum wage or something. But nevertheless, I would go in there and they would teach me to use machines. They teach me to, they taught me a lot of the basics. So that was very important. And you don't need a whole lot. I think when you're first starting out, you just need to have a grasp on all the basic stuff. And then eventually, I think thankfully we live in a world where, hey, you're not limited to the local talent, right? You can scout literally around the world and find someone who you feel is on top of their stuff, and you feel would mesh well with you as a person, and and knows how to work with the set of goals that you have. But in-person stuff, I think it's fantastic for newer people, and then also for someone who's trying to really cut their teeth when it comes to like helping people get their goals. I had some in-person experience, whether it be for the longest time, as a teen, I was like that nerd that knew enough. So I would help people out all the time in the gym. And then eventually I did some personal training. And then even after that was over, I still did a lot of just helping out at the gym and showing people things. And that taught me a lot from a trainer's perspective in regards to how to handle, talk, and approach people, and that you can approach and talk to everyone exactly the same. So yeah, in-person stuff, important for both the trainer and also for the trainee.
Well said.
I definitely agree with you. Do you have any mentors or like role models or people that you kind of learned a lot from when you were coming up and still kind of putting together your knowledge base?
Yeah, man. I like to say that there's a lot of things in my life where I didn't have like the best influences growing up. But thankfully fitness was the first thing ever where I had a solid group of people there to help me out. I think first person ever was Lane Norton. He was the first guy that I saw like decide to do a natural bodybuilding show, and I'm like, wow, this is cool. And he was only 19 at the time, and seeing him go from X amount of weeks out to like I'm show ready was like breathtaking to me. I'm like, fuck, we can control things like that, and he's using a lot of scientific methods to get there. So I found that very intriguing, and through Lane, I found his mentor, and his mentor was Dr. Joe Klemczewski, who to this day is, when we talk about like bad boys walk in silence, like a lot of people don't know about Joe, but Joe is everything, man, everything. Like he picks up graduate degrees like it's nothing, and he's like doing it when it comes to business and doing it when it comes to life. You know, he's got a bunch of kids that are doing fantastic and keeps himself in wonderful shape, and is just so rich in knowledge. So Dr. Joe was probably, when I look at everything, like he was probably the guy that we most tried to model what we were doing after. And yeah, no, he's still going strong. He's still around. And if people are listening, they don't know who Dr. Joe is, it's like, you better learn about it, because
how do you spell his last name?
Who, I'd get it wrong. Klemczewski, Dr. Joe. If you look at the diet doc, you
Got it.
Yeah, but Joe is something else, man. And so much of what we have today is because of Joe. But you know how it is. Like, these kids don't know, but it's Joe.
No, mentors are great. What so I see you on your stories. Yeah, you're helping your mom out. She's getting into the gym. How do you motivate your family members, bro? That's like the hardest thing I've found out to be. And it's, even as competitor, even off season, it's so hard to get them to eat like we eat. And it can be a struggle. I know you're Mexican, I'm Pakistani, so like the foods tend to have a lot of high carbs, high fats, a lot of pills. But how do you motivate your family members?
Yeah, you know, it's funny that cultures do that, because I think a lot of the foods that around the world they eat, they're like staples. They used to be like celebratory meals. Like when I look at the classic Mexican diet, it was like corn and beans and like certain like squashes, and that's what they ate. And then every once in a while, when like, hey, they were balling, it's like, hey, let's make some tamales, you know. But like, you know, obviously industrial revolution, and like now they're eating that like 3 times a day, right? So it's hard, because like for us, it's our culture. It's just what we do. We don't think it's funny to wake up and have a whey protein shake, you know, and this caffeine supplement, and you know, get going. It's not odd to us. It's very second nature. But on that front, even to me, like, it's hard for me to get my family to hear me out, because to them, like, I am me. I am not like what other people like online see me as. So it's that running joke, the whole, you know, family events, you don't talk about politics, religion, and fitness, and you're good. But when they do want to listen, what I make sure is that, you know, they start, and this is an Eric Helms analogy, is that, you know, maybe for you guys, when you guys were kind of fitness freaks and into this, and we're just looking for that next step, and it's like, here, boom, macros, and you're like, dude, this is perfect. It's hitting the spot. I can do this. But for a lot of other people, that's like the deep side of the pool, you know? So you need to start them in the shallow water, and then from there, you know, work them into something. Again, like, you need it to exceed a little bit more what they would be, you know, handing out to themselves, left up to their own doing. And it can be simple, like, hey, it's like, Mom, you know what? Let's focus on eating protein 3 times a day. You have 3 servings of fruits, 3 servings of veggies. You keep the rest for now if you like. Keep showing up to the gym. And here's a program that is sustainable, that is challenging, and it'll get you somewhere. And I think that's not just with family members, but with like noobs. It's like, that's kind of sort of how you have to treat them. Because, hey, there's that, what is it called? The rapid fat loss diet. I don't know if you guys have heard of it, but Lyle McDonald popularized it, and he showed people it was a very science-based and effective way to crash diet, right? Like, we can do that, and we'd be like, if we need to, we'll do it, no issue. You know, we have enough in the tank to do that. But for other people, it'd be like, they last half a day. So with my mom, it was always that. It's like, hey, what can you do now? And now she's gotten to the point where we've had her track calories, never macros. She tracked calories. And now we're getting away from that. And she's just kind of knows what 2,000 calories feels and looks like throughout the day. So it was a process. She's the only one that's listened to me though, man. Everyone else is kind of doing their own thing, but that's typical.
Bro, it's hard. So tracking calories before tracking macros. I like that.
Or habits, in fact. Like, if you get someone who has done nothing and you just get them on a proper training program and they eat a high protein diet, like, they're going to change. Just like those bros at the gym that, you know, they don't know what they're doing. They just eat a lot of protein and they try to do more over time in the gym. And they tend to be the ones with the best body comp in the gym, despite the fact that all they really know is effort and consistency, you know?
Damn. And sometimes I wonder, like, sometimes we fall into this overthinking mindset. And sometimes I'm like, imagine starting a business without knowing sales and marketing, but just knowing that you have to sell these plans So then you like go up to people and you're like, this is for $50. And I in my experience in beginning, a lot of people who know less actually end up doing more. Like they end up like putting more consistency. They end up putting more effort. Like for me, right? When I started, I was consuming less protein than my buddy Zach. My buddy Zach was all about the anabolic window. I was smart enough to be like, fuck no, that's not real. But I get that point. One of the questions we got on Facebook to ask you was, how do you get that vascular at the end before step? Like all of your pictures, you got some like really good vascularity. So how do you get to that point? Do you use any supplements for that, or let's talk about that a little?
See, it's funny. As a kid, I remember I used to have this thing for vascularity. Like I remember there was this weird phase that I went through, like ages, I guess like 8 through 10, where like vascularity was just a huge deal to me. And I wanted to grow up to be vascular. And I guess fortunate enough for me, like it's always kind of been that way. Like even when I ran track, I remember during hot track meets when it was like 90 outside, like my legs would just look like leaves basically. So there's a huge genetic component to that. On stage, it doesn't really matter a whole lot. Like, you know, we've all seen Jay Cutler next to Ronnie Coleman. Jay Cutler's not very vascular. Ronnie's pretty vascular, but you really even can't, like, that doesn't play a huge role. So it's a fun thing. But a lot of it is in large part genetic. And then also like you have to get lean enough, because there is a point where I'm like, okay, he's kind of vascular. And then I lose 5 pounds and it's like, that is gross. So a lot of it is you maximize that by just getting leaner.
No supplements, right?
No.
No magic pills.
No, nothing. I take a little bit of salt before I get on stage, because it does get blood into your vascular system, but that's about it.
Madison loves salt. We were talking about that the other day.
Salty over sweet, absolutely.
Yeah, well, lots of regular salt, and then like I also really like taking like some potassium salt before training. Like I just I feel like it ups my intracellular pump a lot.
Oh yeah. That's exactly what we take before we get on stage. Yeah, that Morton light salt. Yeah.
Morton
I have a light salt too. That one's a blend. What kind of training split do you like? I was gonna ask this one before. And frequency too.
I end up going back to the upper lower. It ends up being my sweet spot in regards to what connective tissue can take. So it's upper lower 4 times a week right now. I could probably progress a little bit faster if I did a fit day, but then I'd run the risk of breaking. So every once in a while I'll add a fit day of training, but it comes in and then it comes out, comes in and it comes out. So it's I see training volume sometimes like speeding, you know, like you can be driving down the freeway and it's like, you know what, I think I trust this. I'm gonna go 10 over, you know, but don't do that for too long, was you're gonna get caught. And it's kind of the same way with training. Once you have a firm grasp of what your requirements are. So I try to obey the speed limit most of the time these days.
That fifth session, will it be like in arms, or what do you usually do on that extra?
Yeah, it'll be a third upper body day, and primarily I'll focus on the areas that need the most work, and for me that ends up being my arms and my back usually.
Yeah, my arms need work.
No, dude. Yeah. Hey, so this was great. I'm running. I think I asked you everything I wanted to ask you. We covered training. We covered basic personal training. We covered beginners, intermediates, advanced. Last thing I really want to ask is like, how do you know if you're a beginner, intermediate, or advanced? Like, how do people even, because I see a lot of people thinking they're advanced and they're in the intermediate section. A lot of intermediates thinking they're beginners, but they're definitely over intermediate. Where do you define that?
See, the funny part is it looks so different from person to person, you know? Like I know this one kid named Nsima. Online he's the natty professor. Yeah. So on stage he's like 6 feet tall. He's like 230 pounds on stage. So really big, dense dude. And I'm pretty sure for Nsima, when he was supplementing with strength training and playing soccer, he probably had more muscle than I have right now. So there's like, it's going to look very different, like, you know, like from person to person. So a lot of folks are like, well, I don't look like, you know, like so-and-so, I don't look like Matt. So I'm probably a beginner. And it's like, no, dude, you know, this is just what you have to work with. And once you identify that, that's super important, because then you know what your expectations are and you can progress and live a happier, fit life, I guess. I'd say that it goes back, best way to kind of measure this is how much time have you spent eating enough and training progressively. And for a beginner, it really doesn't take more than 6 months. So that can be done with quickly. Because a beginner is basically, sometimes you can get stronger workout to workout, you know, you bench press on Monday and then on Friday, you're lifting more already. Like, so that's a ranked beginner. And intermediate is something where you might have to, you know, wait to progress like 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. And that's a good way to scale it. Like when you have to progress every week, you're probably early intermediate. When it's, you know, middle of the road, every 2 weeks, maybe you can sneak some stuff in. And third week is probably towards the tail end of that. And how long that takes, it's probably going to be about, so you take your 6 years of beginner, you've got 6 years, 6 months of beginner. And then how long does it take to go from, you know, intermediate to end of intermediate phase? If you do it right, but this is where people start doing funny things, and they make this a 5-year event sometimes. It can be done in as little as like 1.5 to 2 years of like, again, like eating enough and training progressively. But again, like you have these fat loss phases in between, which kind of lengthens it. So you might not find yourself an advanced bodybuilder until like year 4 or 5. Now, when you're an advanced guy, it's like, shoot, well, I guess things get a lot slower, but it's like a phase that never ends. And it's probably the phase where you might gain the less muscle, but it's also where you will gain the most up here, and you can't lose sight of that.
Do you ever dabble with powerlifting? You ever done powerlifting?
Yeah, I have. I did until 2014. So that was my last meet, and it was 4 days after a bodybuilding show. So
damn, you did both.
Yeah, I did both. Yeah. That was, never do that again. But I did both. That was my goal. My goal was to compete in a pro show, to do the Team Universe in New York. It's an NPC drug light show, I guess you could call it, and get my IFBB pro card. That was the goal. But they wouldn't let me compete because I was pro qualified. They're like, you're going to have to let go of all your pro cards. And I could have just said so and competed, but that would have been dishonest. And also do the powerlifting meet. So I wanted to do all that in 1 month. And it was like my challenge for myself. So I've done that. I don't excel nearly at the same level as, you know, as I do in bodybuilding. So I just got to the point where it's like, hey, you know, it's time to specialize. You can't be that kid like in high school that does every sport anymore. It's like, you know, you're going to college, pick one and just get really good at that. So now we only do bodybuilding, but I love powerlifting. I go to USAPL Nationals every single year because I'm just a huge fan of the sport. I coach it. And it's something that, I just, more than anything now, I live vicariously through my favorite powerlifters and the ones that I do coach.
Who is it?
That I coach?
Yeah, your favorite powerlifter.
Oh, my favorite powerlifter. Oh, this is cool because he happens to be one of our athletes and he lives in my same town. So Bryce Lewis is probably, Bryce is super sick with it. And he lives in my town and I'm so used to Bryce. So like, you know, people at the gym will be all freaked out and he's doing like a 4x3 with like 600 something pounds. And I'm just like looking away on my phone and everyone else is like, you know, like that's just Bryce being Bryce. So no, I like Bryce because he's a tremendous athlete and he's also contributed a lot to the sport. So, you know, what is it if you're good, but you haven't done anything for the platform that has helped you get to where you want to get? So Bryce Lewis is one of my favorites. Jennifer Thompson. Have you guys heard of her?
Yes.
Yeah.
130 something pounds, bench press is 315.
I saw her in Arnold Classic, I think, last year.
Yeah, she flatbacks it too. I have a number of favorite. Dave Ricks, like I think he still has the open squat record in the 93 kilos and he's 57 years old. So like someone's grandpa has 714 on the bar and sinking it like that. And he's stronger in his 50s than he was in his 40s, in his 30s, and in his 20s. So for those of you out there who are trying to rush things, it's like, hey, pay attention to Dave. Like he doesn't seem to be slowing down. He's still a dangerous man. Like you have all these 20 and 30 year olds like at USAPL Nationals are like, if Dave hits his lifts we're screwed. No one's getting that medal. Like, that's how good he is.
Yeah, it's like, and I think, yeah, and what happens is a lot of people time out. They time out. They get to like I'm 24, but I see a lot of powerlifters. They're like, oh, I'm 35. Like, I'm done. And a lot of people just time out. Even in bodybuilding, even in like, you see it in both sports. People time out, and then they're like, I'm done competing, or I'm done with this. But
yeah, I think that's something that comes from like a lot of other sports. Because in other sports, like that age does kind of become a factor, but like especially in bodybuilding and like and powerlifting, it's like a good wine, you know, red wine. It just gets, you usually get better with age. Like Mr. Olympias are usually in the late 30s, early 40s, you know, and a lot of guys don't get good until later. It just takes time to build up the muscle, time to build up the strength. Same thing in powerlifting too. Just, it takes time to build it up. And as long as you don't get hurt, you can pretty much keep going.
Yeah, I look at, you know, like the baseball card or the card side of an athlete's cardboard cutout, and you see what year they were born in. And I'm seeing less and less guys that were born in the 80s. Like, when I'm a track dude, so when I saw Justin Gatlin like still doing something, and I'm like, dude, he's like 34. Like, this is probably the last time, because you know, from there it's this. So that's the fortunate part with this. It's not a power sport. You keep yourself healthy, you can be progressive for a long time. And dude, I want to be 50 something years old and like bearing a 400-pound front squat, and like, that's my grandpa, you know. That's the goal.
Yeah, when is your next show? Like, when do you plan to, and like, do you have an age in mind where you're like, I'm gonna stop competing, or is it like Berto all the way?
You know, I'm gonna do it until it's no longer fun, while I'm still effective, and as long as my body can hold up. Because competitive sports way different than, like, if I just wanted to be healthy, I'd be running, I'd be in less pain, you know. But people look at me like, oh, that sucks, Bert. And it's like, no, this is, like, to me, taping up a joint is part of like the romantic part of the sport. You know, like I love that. Like, if I don't feel my athletic pains, it's like, I don't feel like myself, you know? So, till everything breaks, man, like, they're going to have to pull me out of the stage. I guess the one measure is like when I get the saggy butt, like the inverse butt, like, you know, closing trunk is hanging. It's like, all right, grandpa, you're done, dude, you know, call it.
No. Last show for me.
I love it. So, Berto, where can our people find you? They already know, but
yeah, 3dmusclejourney.com. We keep that place flowing nowadays. Big part is recently we added Andrea Valdez to our coaching staff, and she's good at having the visions, and she tells us what to work on, and we work towards that. And she's been a key component to this. So there's always stuff flowing through there. On Instagram, all of us are pretty much on there all the time. So 3D Muscle Journey, the website for the formal stuff, and all the other tidbits. Instagram, you can find every one of us there.
I love it. No, I'm excited about people, just like, even the people who follow us that don't know you. Like, you're one of the guys that I looked up to, and for the last 3 years, bro, like, even in college, like, I was like, Alberto Nunez, like, these are the dudes that you should follow. So guys, like, check out Berto and all of his stuff. And Berto, my very last question for you would be the best advice for people who want to be experts in fitness and get invited to speak internationally. Like, what advice do you have for those people who want to do that, but they're like in the beginning phases?
I keep saying this, but it goes back to earning your stripes, you know. Man, 10 years ago, I had absolutely nothing to talk about, I feel, you know, when I like look at it from here. The good news is that, you know, so much good information is out there now, where you can get a pretty solid foundation in terms of education online if you're tenacious about it and you know where to look, and you develop a good critical thinking skills. So be crazy about that, I guess. Assume that, you know, you can learn something from everyone, and just never stop learning. Even now, I'm whenever I've come to realize that I've been severely wrong about something, like it's like, oh wow, this is good, because now I'm going to learn some more. So yeah, keep learning, and eventually people take notice, man. You know, this was all labor of love at first, and now it's like to the point where I'm like, shoot, if I decide that I'm done with this, I feel that 10 years later, like people will still be like, come on, Bert, hit me up for one more prep, you know, hey, Bert, just talk here this one last time. So you build it up. It's a lot easier to maintain for sure. But it's that build up phase that you need to be patient with.
I love it, brother. Great. I'll guys follow Berto, and I'll hit the stop recording button